When large-scale displacement happens, you get one decision window, 20 minutes, sometimes 30. In that window, you grab what instinct says is valuable, and instinct, it turns out, is almost always wrong. Not catastrophically wrong. Precisely wrong. Calibrated for the economy that just collapsed, not the one forming in its place. 8 million people forced out of a city. 3 days of food left on the shelves. 48 hours of civility before the math turns ugly. We've talked about where the wave goes. Now let's talk about what you carry when it reaches you. Most people picture gold, electronics, ammunition. Expensive things because expensive and valuable used to mean the same thing. They don't anymore. We built a different list. 12 categories, audited against 2 brutal filters. Before I hand it to you, you need to understand how value actually gets calculated when the old rules stop applying. You're picturing gold, maybe silver. A stack of coins in a waterproof case because gold has held value for 5,000 years, and there's a comfort in that number. You're picturing ammunition, a few thousand rounds of something common. And somewhere in the mental inventory, a generator, a rifle, a month of freeze-dried meals sealed in cans with a 30-year shelf life. Here's what gold is worth when no one has food to trade for it. Nothing. Not because gold stops being gold, because value is not a fixed property of an object. Value is a relationship between an object and a functioning economy. When the economy fractures, that relationship breaks. What you're holding isn't an asset anymore. It's a hypothesis about the future, a bet that normal will return soon enough for gold to matter again. Every major displacement event in the documented record tells the same story. In Venezuela, as the Bolivar collapsed and grocery shelves emptied between 2016 and 2019, the real currency wasn't gold jewelry. It was soap, cooking oil, antibiotics. People were trading gold rings for a bottle of cooking oil, and the person with the cooking oil understood the transaction better than the person with the ring. In post-war European displacement corridors, cigarettes functioned as currency even among people who didn't smoke, because cigarettes had immediate, undeniable utility that gold simply couldn't match in a world without banks. This is the first principle. We call it utility density. How much life-sustaining function does this item deliver per unit of weight and space? A $3 lighter passes the utility density test. A $300 gold coin fails it. Not because one is objectively more valuable, because one keeps you warm and fed tonight, and the other requires a counterparty who believes in long-term economic recovery. The ammunition argument is real, but conditional. Ammunition has utility density only if you have the weapon, the skill, and the willingness to use it under genuine stress. Without the skill, 1,000 rounds is just 40 pounds of metal. With the skill, it becomes something else entirely. And we'll address that in the inventory. The point is this: every ounce of prestige cargo you carry is an ounce not carrying function. And in a displacement scenario, function is the only currency that never devalues. So we went looking. Not through prepper forums, not through tactical YouTube channels with sponsored gear lists. We went through the documented record, survivor accounts, humanitarian reports, post-disaster economic analyses from every major displacement event of the last 80 years. Katrina, the Venezuelan collapse, wartime European displacement corridors, Syrian refugee movement through Turkey and the Balkans. The same categories surfaced across every dataset, every culture, every scale of crisis. Here's what those accounts consistently show. There is a 72-hour revelation. Within 3 days of displacement, people were discarding what they'd grabbed in the initial window, leaving it by the roadside, abandoning it in evacuation shelters, separating the weight they needed from the weight they'd brought, because it was expensive, or sentimental, or because it felt like the right thing to grab when everything felt wrong. The things they kept were not glamorous. The things they wished they'd packed were even less so. We built a framework for understanding the difference. We call it the displacement value audit, a two-layer test you can run on any item in any scenario. Layer 1 is physical. Does this item address an irreplaceable biological need within the first 96 hours? Layer 2 is social. Does this item increase your value to a group, enable trade, or build the kind of trust that gets you inside a network instead of standing at its edge? Before I give you the inventory, you need to be able to run this audit yourself. A list without a framework is just shopping. Shopping for items whose value you can't verify until you need them, at which point you cannot go back. There are 12 categories on this list. Not 12 items, 12 categories. Because within each category, the specific form matters enormously. A water filtration capability can weigh 8 ounces or 8 pounds. The category passes the audit. The wrong version of it still gets you killed. The framework tells you which version to carry. Every displacement event we examined showed the same pattern. The methodology mattered more than the list. Here's the methodology. Layer 1 is the body audit. Your body has exactly 5 problems it will try to kill you with in the first 96 hours. Hypothermia, dehydration, infection, starvation, exposure. Every item on this list addresses at least one of these. Every item that doesn't fails the audit immediately, regardless of price or how many people on the forum swore by it. The 96-hour window comes from wilderness medicine data, military field survival protocols, and every emergency management study that has examined preventable death in displacement scenarios. Most non-combat displacement deaths occur within the first 4 days. Almost all of them are preventable. Take hypothermia first. Core body temperature drops to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and your decision-making degrades before you feel cold. By the time you feel cold, you're already losing. Hypothermia doesn't announce itself. People have died within sight of shelter because the cognitive collapse happened faster than they recognized it. Dehydration moves differently. In moderate temperatures, the body reaches a critical threshold at approximately 72 hours without water. In heat, that number shrinks fast. Clean water is not the second priority in a displacement scenario. It is the first. Not food, not shelter. Water. Infection is slower, but more certain. An open wound in field conditions has a 24 to 72-hour window before systemic infection risk rises sharply. Without wound closure capability and without antibiotics, a cut becomes sepsis. In a grid-down environment, sepsis has no treatment and no appeals process. This is the 96-hour filter. Apply it to everything you currently own. Does this item address at least one of the 5 threats within that window? If yes, it stays in the conversation. If no, it fails. Regardless of cost, regardless of whatever tactical influencer convinced you it was essential. A portable generator fails immediately. Too heavy to move efficiently requires fuel that runs out and produces noise that marks your location to everyone within earshot. By every metric that matters in the first 96 hours, it is a liability dressed up as security. Passing Layer 1 is necessary. It is not sufficient. Some items ace the body audit completely and still get left behind. Because they fail, what comes next? This is where the audit gets harder to calculate. And more important, Layer 2 asks a different question. Not what does this item do for your body, but what does it do for your position? Because here is what every displacement dataset shows past the 2-week mark. Individual survival converts to group survival. The people who made it through extended displacement in the documented record didn't do it alone. They got absorbed into functioning communities. They earned their place in those communities with what they could offer, not with what they owned. The community conversion threshold appears consistently across every event we examined. Solo displacement survival rarely extends beyond 3 to 4 weeks without group integration. Your supplies run out. Your judgment degrades without social reinforcement. Your security becomes impossible to maintain alone. Layer 2 asks one question. When you arrive at a group, are you an asset or a burden? We measure this with a concept called trade velocity. How quickly can this item convert into food, shelter access, protection, or medical care? High trade velocity items convert fast, in any community, at any stage of a crisis. Antibiotics, hand tools, fire starting capability, seeds. The people carrying these get invited inside. Everyone else negotiates from the gate. Low trade velocity items are the inverse: luxury goods, electronics, fiat currency. These require a functioning economy or a very specific counterparty to extract any value. In the first weeks of displacement, that counterparty rarely exists. You are not at a swap meet. You are at a checkpoint, and the person running it wants to know what you can do, not what you own. There is a second dimension to Layer 2 that most people miss. Some items carry social currency not because they're tradable, but because they require skill to deploy, making you irreplaceable rather than simply useful. A suture kit in trained hands signals medical capability. That signal gets you into the network. The same kit in untrained hands is just $10 of plastic and good intentions. Here's the contrast that clarifies everything. A $500 tactical knife versus a $15 suture kit. The knife signals general capability and trades at moderate velocity. The suture kit trades at maximum velocity in any community past the first week and signals exactly the kind of specialized function that makes a group want to keep you alive. The framework is complete. Here's what passes it. First tier, the functional foundation. These are the categories that pass both layers quietly, without drama. They will not impress anyone at the gear table. They are not photogenic. They are the items that keep you operational while everyone else is still arguing about caliber and brand. Run each through the audit as we go. Category 1, water purification capability. Not a product, a system. Gravity-fed filtration paired with chemical backup. Filtration handles volume. Chemistry handles the failure cases filtration misses. Together, they address the first biological priority, dehydration, without requiring electricity, pressure, or any functioning infrastructure at all. Layer 2 pass is strong. Clean water becomes the first major barter commodity in every displacement economy, typically within 48 hours of grid failure. Here's the catch. Most commercial gravity filters are bulkier than people realize when they buy them online, and heavier than they remember when they're carrying mile 4 on foot. Category 2, wound closure and infection prevention. Suture kits, wound closure strips, and broad-spectrum antibiotics where legally accessible. Layer 1 pass is direct. Infection is the slowest of the 5 killers, which also makes it the most preventable if addressed early. Layer 2 pass is maximum. Documented barter hierarchies from post-disaster displacement economies consistently rank antibiotics above food in the first 2 to 3 weeks after supply chain failure. Here's the catch. A suture kit without suturing practice is not wound management. It is a reminder that you should have practiced. Category 3, thermal regulation. The system, not a single garment. A moisture-wicking base layer, an insulation mid-layer, and a wind and water shell at minimum weight. Layer 1 pass. Hypothermia kills silently and early, and it kills decision-making before it kills the body. Layer 2 is lower. Thermal gear doesn't trade as readily as medical supplies, but it sustains the baseline function that makes every other capability possible. Here's the catch. Most people pack one heavy layer and consider the problem solved. 3 light layers weigh almost the same as one wrong layer and perform in conditions the wrong layer cannot handle. Category 4, fire-starting redundancy. Not a lighter, a system. 3 independent ignition methods capable of functioning in different conditions. Layer 1 covers warmth, water purification, and food preparation simultaneously. Layer 2, pass. Fire-starting capability is immediately tradable in any displacement community within hours of arrival. Here's the catch. The skills gap is enormous and almost universally underestimated. Most people cannot start a reliable fire in wet conditions with any of their three methods, which means they have the equipment and not the capability. The equipment without the capability is just weight. Let's stop here, because I know what some of you are thinking. Crypto. Offline hard drives loaded with survival manuals, digital gold, everything you'd ever need stored in 4 ounces of solid-state memory. Here's the problem. Crypto requires power, a functioning device, and network infrastructure to transact, all 3 of which fail simultaneously in a grid-down event. There is no blockchain without electricity. There is no wallet without a charge device. A PDF of a suturing guide is not a skill. It is a reminder that you should have practiced. And carrying expensive electronics in a displacement scenario does one additional thing that matters enormously. It marks you as a high-value target to people you haven't yet assessed. That is not a position you want to be in. The digital assets argument ends there. Category 5. Caloric density. Portable, specifically. Nut butters, rendered fat, properly sealed hard cheeses, maximum calories per pound, minimum preparation required, no refrigeration dependency. Layer 1 pass is direct. Layer 2. Moderate trade velocity, consistent across different stages of displacement. Here's the catch. Weight-to-calorie ratio math must be done before you pack, not while you're carrying mile 8, wondering why your bag is heavier than your plan. Category 6. Multifunction hand tools. Not a specific brand. The principle that one item performs 4 to 6 distinct mechanical tasks reliably under real stress. Layer 2 pass is strong. Mechanical capability signals indispensable function in any community that is rebuilding infrastructure. Here's the catch. Quality variance in this category is enormous. Inexpensive multifunction tools fail under genuine mechanical load, which is the only load that matters. Category 7. Open pollinated seeds. The only item on this list that appreciates in trade value over time rather than declining. Layer 2 pass grows week by week as communities begin thinking past immediate survival toward long-term food production. Here's the catch. Seeds are only valuable if the destination has viable soil, the right growing season, and at least one person who knows what to do with them. These are the categories that don't just keep you alive. They make you the person a community needs to keep alive. Every item in this tier shares one characteristic. It cannot be improvised, cannot be substituted with something cheaper, and its value compounds the longer the crisis extends. In the first week, these items are assets. By the second month, they are leverage. Category 8. Medical diagnostic capability. A blood pressure cuff, a pulse oximeter, a clinical thermometer. Not treatment, triage. The person who can accurately assess whether a wound is infected or septic, whether a patient is stable or declining, is making decisions that save lives in a community without physicians. The pulse oximeter costs $20 at a pharmacy. Its value in a grid-down community is functionally incalculable. Here's the catch. The tools require skill to interpret correctly, not just to operate. Category 9. Information reception. A hand crank or solar-powered radio receiver, not a transmitter. In a grid-down scenario, knowing what is happening 200 miles away is a strategic resource that no food cache can replicate. The person who knows where aid is moving, where conflict is developing, which roads remain open, that person has something every group needs. Here's the catch. Most people buy transmitters and ignore receivers entirely. Category 10. Portable water testing capability. Verifying water safety, not just filtering it, makes you the person every community consults before establishing a water source. Trade velocity grows week over week. Here's the catch. Reagent shelf life requires active management, or the capability expires before it's needed. Category 11. Transferable knowledge in waterproof physical format. Surgical guides, mechanical repair manuals, seed-saving references. These make skills portable and create multiplier effect social currency within any group that receives them. Category 12. A field surgical kit matched precisely to training the carrier has completed, not a first aid kit. The value is maximum and grows non-linearly as crisis duration extends. Here's the catch, and it is total. Without the paired skill, the kit is useless. With it, it is the single most valuable object on this entire list. Score: a plus. You could acquire every category on this list by next Tuesday. Source the filtration system, the suture kit, the seeds, the diagnostic tools, the field surgical kit. Have it packed and staged and ready within a week, and still die within a month. Because a list is not a strategy. A list is a foundation. And a foundation without the structure above it is just expensive material sitting in a bag. Here is the framework that makes the list functional. Items give you days. Skills give you months. Community gives you years. These three compound each other, or they collapse together. A water filter without the knowledge to maintain it fails. A suture kit without suturing practice is not wound management. Seeds without agricultural knowledge produce nothing. Every item on this list is only as valuable as the skill matched to it, and every skill is only as durable as the community that sustains it. First, run the 96-hour filter on everything you currently own. Remove what fails. Be honest. Most people will find their inventory is heavier than it needs to be, and more expensive than it is useful. Second, identify your skills gap. Which categories do you have items for but no ability to deploy under real pressure? That gap is more dangerous than any missing item. Third, acquire the skill before the item where possible. The skill without the item is more valuable than the item without the skill. This is not motivational framing. It is the documented conclusion of every displacement event in the record. Fourth, build community now. The social currency of everything on this list only converts inside relationships that pre-exist the crisis. A suture kit earns trust faster in a community that already knows you. By the time most people start thinking about this, the window for building those relationships has already closed. 12 categories. 2 layers. 1 inventory you can actually use.